At 34, he had everything he once thought would make him feel successful. A steady job, a clean apartment in the city, good clothes, the latest phone, nice coffee machine, wireless everything, food delivery on speed dial, enough money to look fine from the outside. And yet, every night, when the door closed behind him and the room went quiet, his life felt strangely empty. Not tragic, not dramatic, just heavy. Like he was spending his whole life maintaining a version of himself he no longer believed in. He wasn't poor, but he was always short on peace, always short on space, always short on breath. And what changed his life was not a raise, not a luxury vacation, not some giant breakthrough. It started with something much smaller. A notebook, a missed train, a cheap bowl with a crack in it. And one question he had never seriously asked himself before: how much of what I own is actually helping me live? This is the story of a man who stopped chasing more and discovered that needing less can feel like freedom. His name was Ren. He lived alone in a small apartment in Tokyo. Not the kind of apartment people post online. Not ugly either. Just efficient, compact, functional. The kind of place where every object is visible, which meant every unnecessary thing had nowhere to hide. But Ren still found a way to fill it. Packages arrived almost every week. Sometimes small, sometimes expensive, sometimes so forgettable that 2 weeks later, he barely remembered why he bought them. A new desk lamp because the old one felt boring. A better wallet because his current one didn't feel grown enough. A set of glass containers because he thought they would make him cook more. A pair of shoes because he had a hard week. A camera he barely used because he wanted to become that kind of person. That was the pattern. He wasn't buying objects. He was buying possible versions of himself.
Not just one pack.
And each purchase came with the same quiet promise. Maybe this will make life feel more put together. Maybe this will make me more disciplined. Maybe this will make me feel ahead again. But nothing lasted.
It's here.
The excitement always faded faster than the
I
payment.
need to pay for that now.
And by the end of most months, Ren had the same feeling a lot of people have, but rarely admit out loud. He didn't feel irresponsible enough to panic, but he didn't feel free enough to relax, which, in some ways, is worse. Because when your life looks stable from the outside, it becomes harder to confront what's quietly draining you. Every morning, Ren woke up at 6:40. Alarm, shower, mirror, coffee, train.
Almost
His
there.
mornings were precise,
Just a little further.
but not peaceful. He always felt
The
slightly
Tokyo train to
behind,
Shinjuku is
even when he was
arriving
on
at
time.
platform 3.
On the train, he scrolled through images of other people's lives. Minimal apartments, well-dressed men in neutral coats, morning routines, clean kitchens, leather notebooks, simple luxury. He told himself he liked the aesthetic, but the truth was more uncomfortable. He liked what it made him feel for a second, that maybe he too could become someone lighter, calmer, more in control. So he kept buying small pieces of that image.
Definitely need that.
Not enough to ruin himself, just enough to keep hope alive.
One last thing.
That's how modern spending traps people. Not through one reckless decision, through hundreds of emotionally reasonable ones.
Another project
Ren
finished.
worked for a
now
design
to check
firm.
the time.
Good salary, long hours,
Oh, the manager.
respectable title.
All right, see y'all tomorrow.
Nothing glamorous,
Good night,
but
Ren.
enough that people assumed he was doing well.
Have a good evening.
And in some ways, he was.
Payment
He could
sent.
pay rent. He could eat out.
Here's your ramen.
He could replace things
Let
quickly.
me help you with that.
He could afford convenience.
Drone delivery, perfect.
But convenience had become his entire financial personality.
Nothing.
Too tired to cook? Order. Too stressed to think?
Fine, ordering.
Buy something small. Too
Why
mentally
do I
drained to
even
clean?
bother?
Ignore it.
Delivery.
Then buy
More
storage
boxes?
later.
Oh no.
Too empty to sit with himself? Fill the silence with consumption. It looked normal. That's the dangerous part. A life can be deeply unsatisfying while still appearing completely functional. And Ren's life was exactly that. One Thursday night, he came home later than usual. It was raining. His shoes were wet. The train had been delayed. His phone battery was almost dead. He picked up convenience store food on the way home, unlocked his apartment door, stepped inside, and just stood there. Nothing had happened. No crisis, no dramatic event. But the room felt too full. Too many objects, too many unopened items, too many little signs of unfinished self-improvement. The resistance bands he never used. The expensive tea he bought to become someone who slows down. The notebook with 3 pages written. The skincare products lined up like discipline in a bottle. The shirts still carrying tags. The second speaker. The coffee grinder. The cable organizer. The subscription boxes. He looked around and realized something that embarrassed him. His apartment was full of evidence that he was trying to purchase a better life instead of building one. He sat on the floor and ate in silence. And for the first time in a long time, he did not distract himself. No video, no music, no scrolling. Just the sound of rain at the window and a room full of things that had promised more than they delivered. That night, he barely slept. Not because he was in danger, because he could no longer ignore the quiet truth. He had built a life that was convenient to maintain, but difficult to feel. A few days later, on a Sunday morning, Ren visited his mother. She lived outside the city in a smaller town. Her house was modest, quiet, and almost strangely calm. Nothing was excessive. Nothing seemed accidental. Even the old things felt intentional. At lunch, she noticed he was tired. Not physically tired. He always looked physically tired. This was different. He looked crowded. Mothers notice things like that. She didn't interrogate him. She simply stood up after the meal, walked to a drawer, and brought back a small notebook with a plain cover. No branding, no elegant design, no motivational quote, just paper. She placed it in front of him and said, "When your father and I were younger, we wrote everything down for 1 year. It changed how we lived." Ren looked at it and gave the kind of half-smile people give when they think advice will be simple and useless. But she continued, "Not to control money, to understand it." That line stayed with him. Not to control money, to understand it. She told him to write 4 things each month. How much money comes in, how much he wants to save, what he spends, what could be improved. Simple, almost too simple. But Ren took the notebook home, and that night, for the first time, he wrote the truth. Not what he hoped his life looked like, not what sounded responsible. The truth. He listed the subscriptions, the takeout, the random purchases, the taxi rides, the convenience spending,
not another late
the
night
online
purchase.
orders
I need
made
to write
after
this down.
midnight.
Again.
When he added it all up, the number wasn't shocking because it was huge. It was shocking because it was unconscious. So much of his money had not been spent with intention. It had leaked out through exhaustion. And once he saw it clearly, he couldn't unsee it. That was the beginning. Not a transformation, just honesty. But honesty is where most real transformations begin. A week later, one of his dishes slipped while washing. It didn't shatter, just cracked along the side. Ren stared at it for a second and instinctively thought, "I should replace this." That was his normal reflex. Replace quickly, solve smoothly, move on. But he remembered something his grandfather used to say when he was young. Motai nai. A waste. A pity. Not just because something is damaged, but because value is being dismissed too easily. So, instead of throwing the bowl away immediately, Ren held it in his hands and looked at it. It was old, simple, a little worn. It had been in his family for years. And suddenly, it felt absurd how quickly he had been trained to discard things the moment they lost perfection. That bowl became symbolic. Not because it was expensive, because it exposed something in him. He had been living as if the answer to discomfort was always replacement.
I thought this would make me
Bad
feel
mood?
better,
Replace the feeling.
but I was just trying to
Boring
fix the
room?
discomfort.
Replace the atmosphere. Old object? Replace the object. Tired identity? replace the image. But replacement had not made him richer. It had made him restless. So he kept the bowl.
I thought new things would make me happy.
Not because it was efficient,
but
because he wanted to relearn respect.
These are the things.
I thought
Respect
they
for
might help.
objects. Respect for money. Respect for enough. That was when spending began to change. Not through force, through a shift in values. Ren started small. He stopped buying things for 2 weeks unless they were necessary. No challenge post, no announcement, no dramatic cleanse, just a pause. The first thing he noticed was not savings. It was discomfort. There were so many moments in his day where spending had been serving as a tiny emotional exit.
You owe this fee.
A rough meeting, open shopping app, a boring evening, browse, a
Can I
stressful
get a
train ride
medium
home,
latte to go?
buy coffee, a lonely Saturday,
Okay.
order food and something extra. Without those automatic exits, he had to sit inside his life more directly. At first, that felt harsh. Then it became revealing. He realized his problem was not that he lacked pleasure. It was that he had lost intimacy with ordinary life. He didn't know how to enjoy a simple meal unless it arrived in premium packaging. He didn't know how to rest
Not
without
now.
stimulation.
I'll just
He didn't
sit
know how to
here.
feel rewarded without spending. So he began rebuilding those muscles. He cooked rice and miso soup one evening and ate without a screen. He walked without destination. He cleaned one shelf and left it half empty. He sat in silence with tea and noticed how strange it felt to do nothing. That empty shelf mattered more than it should have, because he realized how deeply he had feared empty space. An empty shelf made him think something was missing. An empty evening made him think life was boring. An empty feeling made him think he needed consumption. But slowly, he began to understand a quieter idea. Not every empty space needs to be filled. Some spaces give life room to breathe. And that changed how his apartment felt. Then, it changed how his mind felt. Over the next few months, Ren kept using the notebook. Patterns became obvious.
Rent.
He spent the most when he was tired, the second most when he felt inadequate, and the third most when he wanted to imagine becoming someone else.
What am I even?
That last one hit hard, because it explained nearly everything. The books he bought but didn't read, the gear he bought but didn't use, the clothes that matched an identity more than a life. He had been purchasing aspiration, not utility. And aspiration is expensive when you keep outsourcing it to objects. So he asked himself a harder question. What kind of man am I trying to become, really? Not visually, not socially, not algorithmically. Actually, the answer was embarrassingly simple. He wanted to become a man who was calm, dependable, uncomplicated, financially steady, present in his own life. And suddenly many of his purchases made no sense, because they belonged to a performance, not a person. That realization freed him. He started wearing the same reliable clothes more often, repairing instead of replacing, using what he had fully before buying more, finishing food, canceling subscriptions, eating simpler meals, tracking not only what he spent, but how each expense made him feel afterward. And for the first time
It was
in
a good
years,
month.
the month stopped feeling like
I'm ready for
something
the
that
next.
happened to him.
I'm ready for the next.
It became something he was shaping, quietly, deliberately. That's what discipline often looks like in real life. Not intensity, consistency. After 6 months, Ren's life looked smaller from the outside. Fewer packages, fewer shopping bags, fewer meals out, fewer impulse upgrades. But inside, his life felt larger. He had more room in his apartment, more room in his budget, more room in his attention, more room in his weekends. He began noticing details again. The sound of water boiling in the morning, the comfort of re-wearing something that fit perfectly, the satisfaction of finishing what he already owned, the relief of looking at his bank account without quiet dread, the strange dignity of no longer needing new things to prove he was progressing. Nothing in his life
I
looked
think
dramatic.
I'm ready.
That's what made it powerful. Peace rarely announces itself with fireworks. It arrives as the absence of pressure. One evening, a coworker invited him out after work.
You just wouldn't
During
believe the
dinner,
rent
the conversation
prices.
turned to
And the
money,
salary growth is
apartments,
stagnant.
raises, and travel.
We should just travel the world
Everyone
instead.
spoke in the
Yes,
usual
anywhere but
way,
here.
not honestly, but competitively. Ren
Just
listened.
need to take a deep breath.
6 months earlier, that conversation would have
Remember when I
awakened
used to
something
freak
in
out
him.
over everything?
Comparison,
Yeah, I
urgency,
remember.
the need to catch up through spending.
Ren is so
But
much
this
cooler.
time, he felt almost
Yeah, and
untouched
so much more
by
relaxed.
it. Not superior,
I appreciate that.
just less available to manipulation. And that may have been the biggest change of all. He no longer felt that every visible sign of someone else's life was a challenge to his own. He had finally begun defining enough for himself. And once a person does that, the world loses some of its power over them. By the end of the year, Ren had saved more money than he expected. But that wasn't what surprised him most. What surprised him was who he had
lighter
become
now.
in the process. He had become slower
You've
to
changed,
react,
Ren.
less
For
eager
the
to
better,
impress,
I hope.
less ashamed of simplicity, less dependent on convenience, less attracted to perfection. He felt stronger, but quieter. He wasn't performing discipline. He was living inside it. Even his apartment felt different. There were still ordinary things, still imperfections, still old items, worn corners,
peaceful night.
routine meals. But now the space reflected a real person rather than a hopeful costume. And that is what so many people are missing. They think spending less means shrinking
Does
life.
less really mean loss?
But often, spending less removes the static. It clears the stage. It lets you see what your life actually is without all the purchased noise. And sometimes that truth is uncomfortable at first, because once the noise disappears, you can no longer pretend that the next package will save you. But on the other side of that discomfort is something better than excitement: stability, clarity, self-respect. The kind that cannot be delivered to your door. Ren did not become a minimalist icon. He did not quit his job and move to the mountains. He did not suddenly become perfect with money. He simply stopped treating consumption like a cure. And that changed his life.
Good morning.
He learned that waste is not only about money, it is also about attention.
Meow.
That empty space is not always lacking. Sometimes it is freedom. That imperfect things can still be deeply valuable. And that enough is not a disappointing word. It is a powerful one. Because the moment you know what is enough for you, you become harder to rush, harder to shame, harder to sell to. You become calmer. You become clearer. You become more present in your own life. And maybe that is the real Japanese art of spending less and living more. Not just saving money, but removing everything that keeps you from feeling the life you already have. So if you've been chasing more and still feeling strangely empty, maybe the answer is not out there in the next upgrade. Maybe it begins where Ren's did. With one honest look at your life, one notebook, one pause, one decision to stop buying identities you haven't earned, and one quiet question. What if I don't need more to live well? Maybe that's where freedom begins.